Do you believe that we are now live? Hello, everyone, and welcome to another week of The Lunchroom. I'm Sarah Schofield-Manser. I'm the Assistant Director of Special Events and Partnerships at the A.R.T. I'm a white woman with about shoulder-length dark brown hair. I have headphones in. I'm wearing a striped flannel shirt, sitting in a computer chair that can swing around in a yellow room with a bunch of mess in the background from boxes that I haven't unpacked yet. And I'll turn it over to Mark from here.
Hi, everyone. We're back with you live this week, which is very exciting. I'm Mark Lunsford. I'm the artistic producer for Take the Key Series Pronouns. And I am sort of wearing a gray panel jacket with a maroon zip-up sweater, sitting in my living room with a sort of tan recliner and yellow pillow in the background, and some plants that I'm trying desperately to keep alive, which I'm not great at. Welcoming you all back today. I also just want to acknowledge that the land that A.R.T. sits on, the Low Drama Center and Oberon, our performance spaces, is on the traditional unceded territory of the Massachusetts people. Today's a very special lunchroom day because I'm also very, very excited to have LT Gourzong with us, our new technical director. Hey, LT.
Hey, hello. So happy to have you, LT.
Excited to be here.
Yeah. Thanks. Can we just give a quick intro for our guests?
Yeah, so I am LT. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a technical director at A.R.T. I'm wearing a red hat with a white bar on it with glasses. I'm brown complexion, also wearing a tie-dye shirt. And I'm in my office dining room with a assortment of clutter behind me and some photos on the walls.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation today, but also it's been so exciting. LT started with us sort of right at the beginning of 2020?
Yeah, January 6th.
So, started as a technical director and then the theater shuts down.
Why not?
Definitely a long time. We're all growing and learning together, so that's exciting.
I like that. It feels like it's about that time in the hour where I hop off and you invite our guests in. So without any further ado, I will see both of you later. I hope everyone has a great week. I hope everyone joins us next week for another episode of The Lunchroom. Bye, friends.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, without further ado, I'd love to invite Riccardo, Mimi, and Scott into The Lunchroom. Come on in, folks. Hey. Good to see you all.
Good to be here.
I just thought if we could sort of quickly introduce yourselves, and I have sort of fun little tidbits, perhaps unknown things, aside from your bios for our audience. So I'm just going to sort of go in order of how you all show up on my screen. Mimi, you're up first.
Hi, everyone. I am calling in from Clinton Hill, Brooklyn. I'm sitting on my porch. I'm usually not one of these people who does Zoom calls in some kind of like beautiful outdoor setting. This is actually the first time I've done a Zoom call outside. I'm usually very jealous of other people, but I'm just outside because I actually have an assistant working in my studio for the first time since all pandemic, and I didn't want to be in a place where I was wearing a mask. So I'm outside. It's very nice to be here.
And Mimi, a little known factoid is that you actually got married in what is now Oberon, but was Zero Arrow.
Right? Yes, you've done your homework. Yeah. Yep, that was, pre-Oberon. It was the Zero Arrow Theater. This was in 2008, October. It's actually coming up, October of 2008. And I was designing an Anne Washburn play called The Communist Dracula Pageant. And I thought, well, what better place to get married than that?
I mean, that's the truth. Amazing. All right, Scott, you're up next on my screen.
It's great to be here with everybody. And I'm coming to you from Tucson, Arizona. So I'm about 3 hours behind the Eastern time zone. So I've been out here since March 17th. I was in the middle of tech rehearsals and previews for Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf and getting ready to go on to American Buffalo. And when the pandemic hit. So I came out here to a house that I've had for a very long time. I grew up out here. And I went to architecture school at the university here in town. And so I've been here, and I'm thrilled to be with you all today.
Yeah, and Sky, I know that folks are familiar with your work with us on Pippin and Finding Neverland, but I think what folks might not know is that, sticking on the Oberon theme, you designed the Donkey Show and therefore sort of designed Oberon when it became Oberon.
That's right. That's exactly right. Yeah, it was a while ago.
So many mirrors.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of mirrors, a lot of steel. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very, I think everyone knows that Oberon has a special place in my heart. So I'm always looking for reasons.
Same.
And Riccardo.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I am calling from Hamden, Connecticut. I'm in my studio. My house is right over there. And this is where I have been pretty much since March. And this is the place that I used to teach, where I teach actually on Zoom at the Yale School of Drama. And can't wait to start working, let me tell you.
Yeah, I think we all feel that.
Yeah.
Riccardo, you have like a very long history with A.R.T. What was your very first show?
My very first show was Ronald Rittman's Dream of the Red Spider. It was on the main stage. And I'll give you the year. It was in 1992. It was the year that I graduated from the drama school. The story is that Robert Brustein came to see my project at the Rep, which was Susan Laurie Parks' The Death of the Last Black Man. And then when we went to the Clam Bake in New York City, he invited Ron Daniels. And that's how it all began at A.R.T. That was my first show ever.
Wow, that's amazing.
Professional, yeah.
So for folks too, Sarah just put in the chat, but to say for those watching, as we're chatting today, please feel free to pop any questions you have in the Q&A. As always, we'll try to spend the last 10 or 15 minutes or so to get to those questions. But to start us off, I'd like to pass it up to LT to get us sort of moving in our conversation today.
Yeah, thanks. It's great to hear those little tidbits about everybody, since I did just start in January. It's fun to learn fun facts about all you folks. Wanted to kind of start off with just the idea of like the role of set designer in the hyper collaborative environment that y'all find yourselves in, and how you see that role, particularly in concert with other collaborators and engineers and technicians, and what are things you pull in and out of that as individuals. For anybody that would like to start. I can pick someone if you want.
Well, I'll start because I was literally just talking about this with my assistant right before coming up here. I think it's super important. I mean, I love involving people very early on, and I know other people have different schools of thought about this, but I guess I basically, it comes down to the fact that.
Oh no.
Oh, there you are.
Am I back?
You're back.
Maybe the outdoor thing is not so good. I'll move if it continues to be bad. I guess I just acknowledge that, different groups of knowledge, and I'm like, I think it's best to avail myself of the knowledge of the technical field. Like, I love I love having like early conversations with technical directors. Maybe part of it is because I'm the kind of person or designer who like really loves to know how things work. And I kind of love engineering a little bit, even though I don't think of myself as an engineer. But I kind of love finding out about it. So I find the collaboration with the technical director to be both like you know, fascinating on a personal level, but I also think for the work, you know, the earlier you can get the team to, you know, to be involved, like the more invested people can be, I find that ends up creating better work. You know, in the end, everyone has had more time to put thought and energy into it, and you know, and it feels more like a collaborative process.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that, I mean, I trained as an architect. I'm here in Tucson first. And so and that background is what informed my desire to kind of create spaces that, you know, elicited emotional responses from people. And those spaces are, and environments or wherever we're working, bringing in the collaborative part of that team is so important, and especially the technical team and who are people that we're working with to bring this vision to life. And I agree. I feel like the earlier the better. And also, I think most of us are in theater because we love working with people. I mean, I love that team, and we don't go off, like as a designer, I don't go off into a sort of room and shut the door and then come back with a model and say, "Hi, I hope you all love it." It's just all a very, very, very kind of elaborate conversation that starts from the very first moment you put your eye on the script or listen to the music that you're designing a dance for, or the opera, or whatever that project is. And from there, bringing in the people that are going to help make it possible from the earliest stages is so incredibly important. And that's very often how we keep our projects in line with, even if we start thinking about like budgets and things like that too, which is, you know, always a factor, like making sure that what our dreams are still realistic within the framework of what we're trying to accomplish, and then they also allow us to dream broader and can come up with incredibly valuable suggestions on how to accomplish something that we may not have been thinking of. But I do think that it's incredibly important. The earlier they are, the better it is. I mean, the collaborations are always more successful.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Starting early for sure. You know, since we're talking about experiences at the ART, I would like to say, for example, that I developed a very, very, very close relationship with Steven Sutherland since 1993, I think it was, or 94 when I did Fedra. You know, I gravitate to real materials, and some of it is big. And the conversations that I always had with him helped me envision how to combine not only the visual idea for the piece that we're creating, but also the knowledge that goes into creating, let's say, something that is a huge steel structure. What are the supports? When do I show them? And I would tell him, for example, show me how an engineer does it. I want to show me the drawing, because then I'm going to articulate it in the design. I want to see that which my brain, like me, I'm not an engineer, you know, I want to know that so I can integrate it into the design. And through the years, for almost 20 years at ART working with him, that was such a amazing relationship. You know, it was. We also had a shorthand, and I can say the same thing. I'm, you know, like everyone in this group. You know, you develop these relationships, you know, like with people like Neil Mazzella at Hudson and so many other places. And I think it's crucial. I did it with LT at when she was a third-year student, right, at the drama school. We did Father Comes Home. And it's a crucial relationship. Yeah.
I kind of have a kind of follow up to that. And LT, I sort of pose this to you as well as a question. Because we were having a conversation recently. I can't even remember what Zoom meeting I was in, right? But Diane Paulus was sort of articulating this idea that I think comes through very specifically in the shows that y'all designed at ART, at least in the time I've been working here. Mimi with Great Comet and Moby-Dick, Scott with Pippin and Finding Neverland, Riccardo with Otterball, and Jagged Little Pill. Diane was articulating this thing that, like, this space between the audience and the performance is this sort of spiritual place where theater actually happens, right? And that idea about specifically how that applies both in an engineering perspective for a technical director and from a design perspective for a scene designer, that piece that you're creating often is the very first large visual impact an audience has about a show. It often does a lot to sort of set that first impression. And so I wonder what all of you think about in terms of that, I'll call it a burden, that burden in this idea that like you're helping articulate this spiritual space, right, where the theater happens.
I'll just jump in and just think of our long history working together with Diane and at A.R.T. And I remember early on, I mean, when Diane and I were, how we met was we were both in grad school, and I was assisting a designer, Marina Dragic, and she was working with Andrei Serban on opera. And so during my summer break from school, I was working with Marina, and that's how Diane and I first met. And then our first project together was when we did the French version of the Donkey Show. And a word all the way back then was immersion and immersive environments, and trying to kind of blur that line of separation between audience and actor and performer. So that there is it's trying to figure out how to creatively make those, as you say, spiritual connections. I mean, the reason why I do what I do was because it was so magical to me to understand that you could take a narrative or a story and bring three-dimensional life to that, create emotional responses, and how you design it. And I even think that, like what Riccardo said, the idea of articulating design down to the details, each of those details can support the narrative and the ideas that you have about the piece that's being presented. So I think everything can support that idea of this kind of blending of performer and audience. And the greatest magic is, for me, I think about how often are we able to create the sort of response of almost an awe or a gasp or something like that. So looking for those, that for me is almost like a childlike thing. The first time I ever saw a curtain go up and just hearing that gasp you don't get that many chances to have that in your life. And so how many can you create that have that moment of awe or inspiration? And as you coming back to your question about we're the first to kind of, we establish an audience's kind of first take on a piece or whatever they're saying. And I think that it is a great responsibility, but it's also a great piece of magic that's kind of in your hands. And I think that that's always exciting.
Right. Something that I keep going back to always is that the theater is a sacred space. A ritual will be enacted. So therefore, whatever is on stage and however you use that stage, including the theater space, there's an inherent connection between the witnesses, the audience and performance. And I am obsessed with that trance that happens when the audience surrenders completely and believes what's happening all around them. And I, for example, when with working with Diane, she also has this energy of reaching for the impossible. So whatever seems familiar to you will be dismantling that design process, because what we're looking for doesn't even exist. You have the text, you may have the music, but the intention is to surpass your wildest expectations. So when that first chord starts in a musical, or it's just a word in a play, that mysterious trance begins. And to me, that is the thing that I love to pursue. And it's what, and the space, using the space for what it is.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly with everything you both just said. The very first question that I tend to ask myself when I'm designing anything is, what is the nature of the event I'm trying to create? And by that, I mean, like, the event of the performance, which includes, from the moment that the audience is walking into the space, you sense like what it is, spatially, what it is that we're doing. Right? And that has a lot to do with the way that the audience is oriented in relation to the performance. Is the audience complicit in the performance? Are the audience witnesses? Are they sitting in different kinds of chairs, which means that they're going to be involved with the performance in a different way. So I feel like really identifying the nature of the event and how you want the audience to be in relation to the performance is kind of the first question. And that may mean, it's something that is a, 360-degree environment, like Natasha Pierre. Or it may mean like, oh no, we're definitively a proscenium, and the audience is over there, and the performance is here. And in the play Fairview that I just designed, like, it has a very, very strong proscenium, and the whole concept was about the fourth wall. So, but even then, making that an explicit choice, and I think ultimately the theater space is a civic space. It is about people are in relation to each other. And so that's always the first question for me.
And I think
that's brilliant. I mean, I agree. Like that's a fantastic. And yeah, it is a communal space. It's like a ritual space, communal space, community space. It's like, it is this shared space. So I think, it's exciting to be able to define that.
Yeah. And I had wanted to say also, like, I also in architecture. And so I, fully believe that in the power of three-dimensional space to, kind of shape people's emotions and experience. So, like when you walk into a cathedral, right, with the soaring Gothic pillars, like you feel a certain way because of the way that architecture has been designed. And when you walk into a subway tunnel, you feel this kind of compression, and that gives you feeling. Or you walk into an attic or a basement, like all of these kinds of spatial experiences have a dramatic effect on you. And so, really thinking about that as people are walking into the space as well.
The visceral reaction that, for example, if you were to, you do think, let's say that sometimes you walk into a space, you don't know what it is yet. For example, in the case of Jagged Little Pill, you don't know what it is when it begins. It's almost like a Peter Brook empty space. But slowly but surely you begin to not even adding, as the story begins to unfold, you do things to the space. And it's amazing what happens when you're manipulating height, width, and how the audience relates to that, especially if there's music. What we were calling in that Jagged Little Pill the Dionysian space, like the case in point would be You Ought to Know. To see that audience explode with three simple things that just flew in, but in sync with the music. It was so magic when you see that reaction from the audience, because they're so connected. And it has to do with sonic, the sound of the space. It has to do with how you're manipulating the space itself and the energy of the performers running towards the audience, and you go, boom, there you are. There it is. That's that magical moment that you crave.
That's sort of an example of the most incredible synchronicity of collaboration, when all departments are working together to get that moment and get that reaction, and everybody's on the same page and the same beat and the same rhythm. I think that is the most thrilling. And when you see those responses, there's nothing more gratifying than that, because you've really touched somebody. It's thrilling to hear about, Riccardo.
Elsie, I'm interested because you have this task of sort of realizing that vision, right? But also realizing its safety. And particularly when we start to talk about the audience's relationship to that performance space. So it's both about like delivering that artistic concept and also delivering a safe environment. And I wonder how that sort of sets up for you when we think about this sort of like sacred space or sort of spiritual space in the theater.
Yeah, for sure. I think a lot of it also goes back to that whole collaboration moment that we were talking about earlier too, about like hearing about what the space wants to be from the set designer, so that when I'm looking at it from a safety perspective, that the things that we're suggesting or having ideas about that are actually in line with the vision of the play, versus it being like that as much as safety is its own aspect, that it needs to be integrated with the production, and that there shouldn't be like a whole other aspect of the show. It's like, oh, I know this is the vision you had, but this is what we need to do instead. That they need to figure out like a large portion of what I'm working on is how to make those things happen together. And the easiest way to make those things happen together is when you're part of those earlier conversations, to understand what is the heart and essence of the design, so that as we're moving forward, I'm working with the design team as opposed to working against them. So we're actually moving forward like a true moving environment with each other, and how that all works and looks together is a large part of what I think is important, that it's integrating those concepts.
One thing that makes me think of actually is the railings in Natasha Pierre in the Great Comet of 1812. So, initially, of course, in my first model, right, I'm like got these curving platforms and banquettes and all of this, and no one ever wants railings, right? But then, of course, when you have audience, the entire set is traversed by the audience, and there's lots of steps. Obviously, there need to be railings, and so, but then, with the back and forth, between technical folks and, general manager, like everybody's concerned about safety. So, but then the railings became actually a defining visual aspect of the composition, and the material, so then we were like, well, what material can we make them out of so that it becomes integrated with the rest of the design? And so then they became these beautiful, curved brass railings. And then the actors loved using them because they could really like use them and lean forward. So, something that started out as something that had to exist for safety reasons, became completely integrated and embraced both visually and performatively.
There's something to be said too about the collective at the A.R.T. for decades, that I cannot think of anything. I'm sure all of us can say the same thing in this group. You throw the wildest ideas at that theater, wildest, and they get done. There's something in the DNA of the institution that is so thrilling when you think of the Natasha, the Mimi's design, Scott's magic and Find the Neverland, it's I don't know that if it is the only theater, but it's one of the very few theaters who actually pursue and accomplish this impossible dreams. And I think it's incredible, actually.
Yeah, it is incredible. I mean, like just before we jumped on, I was just saying to LT, I said, I'll be calling you later. And, because there's such a close, I think the directorial conversations are usually the earliest conversations, and with the author sometimes as well. But that first conversation is I'm calling it LT and Rick. And at this point, and before that, Stephen, who's like, absolutely, he's like a magic maker. And, that's exactly right. I think you create the possibility of these dreams becoming reality and help shape these into achievements as opposed to just dreams. And I think that's incredible.
It's certainly one of the more exciting parts of the process. I will say it hasn't helped my cigarette habit, but no, I very much agree. I think there's a lot in there in terms of, and LT, I don't know how you feel, but having a space like the Loeb that also, even at its age, has this sort of great flexibility, or there are lots of opportunities to really articulate a world and that space that don't exist in all theaters. I think particularly because it does not have a very specific design aesthetic in the house that kind of allows it to camouflage. And certainly the three of you and others have really taken advantage of that in a way that I think is exciting.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the things that was told to me in my interview, that the Loeb is a flexible space, and it does a lot of things. And then now it's like going into that concept of like realizing the dream, and then how do you integrate that into what a current schedule looks like, and what the emerging schedule in these times look like, and what is that behind the scenes work-life balance that might have been happening to make those dreams, and then how to recreate and reframe those so that we're moving forward as like a healthy place from a staff standpoint to still make these dreams happen. But I think all of that is ultimately rooted in what we've been talking about, of like having those early conversations. So like, as we have those early conversations to create these designs, that's when we should be talking about those things versus like getting to the first week of build and then having the conversation where it's like, oh, I know I didn't bring this up 5 weeks ago when we were talking about the design. Like that's not helpful for anybody. That's just putting everybody in a weird spot where it's like no one's being set up for success if you're not working together to make that cohesive schedule so that we're creating those designs with a good balance of what it means for all the staff executing it.
I'm glad you brought that up, LT, because it kind of goes into sort of the next thing I wanted to discuss, which is this sort of tension, right, between resource and vision. And I think that's particularly true in a lot of the shows that you all have designed, where we're really trying to achieve this very specific, very particular concept that is exciting to all of us with a finite amount of resources. So I wonder sort of what strategies have worked for all of you, all four of you, and sort of finding this balance in resource and vision, and ways in which you have found to sort of get the best product and the greatest alignment with the team, kind of making the most out of what you have, right?
Jump in just for a second. I mean, it is, and especially now, even it seems to be even more of a consideration and a concern as we keep moving forward in this sort of uncharted terrain of making theater in a time when it's as challenging as it is. And I think it comes down to what we're the three of us are all talking about is like conceptual clarity. And I think you can, like, if you're looking at a piece and discovering the conceptual heart of what your design is, and it all kind of boils down to what that, like, conveying what that is and those ideas in the three-dimensional form, like those choices have to be supported budgetarily. And if you have that sort of strong clarity of concept and what in alignment with the director's vision and the piece that you're working on, that clarity can be done simply, elaborately, but it's like having that clarity, I think, and what you want to communicate about the work that you're doing and how the work communicates the ideas about what you have about the piece along with your team members is so important. And I think that it just comes down for me to like editing or simplifying, and you kind of start maybe with a broader canvas, and then it's just refining and refining and refining, so that ultimately it makes even maybe your conceptual clarity even stronger by having these sort of this framework or these challenges. And I feel like that's I think how we all kind of hopefully use budget and other, sometimes it's engineering, or sometimes whatever the challenge is, like keeping the conceptual clarity of what you set out to do in the very beginning, and those first few words or those first few thoughts you had about the piece, that is staying true to those.
I try not to, for all the reasons that Scott just mentioned, I try not to get too involved in what the number is, the actual budget, because I want to have my own sacred space with the director and the collective that's creating the piece. Because as Scott said, once you have that vision, we all know that removing things is always a good exercise, because the essential is what you want to get at. But you cannot get to the essential if you don't have the macro. You have to have the thing, and then you go in it with the director. And again, that's when that close relationship with the technical team and the technical director is so important, because they can actually, for example, understanding the dialogue and what it is that the collective wants to create helps that technical director to give you some advice or some ideas of, hey, what if, like the railing and that Mimi just mentioned, or something else. And then I think it's almost like a Japanese garden. You begin to remove, and then what remains, it's truly necessary. It's around that time that I asked for the number. Once I,
yeah, exactly.
And then I go, oh my God, we're in
How
trouble.
close are we? Yeah.
It's like, wow.
No, budget can't drive the creative process. You have to be respectful and sort of know the ballpark. But it's like, you're exactly right. It is like, it's sort of the refinement and the conceptual clarity was what's always going to remain. And as long as you're true to the vision, like the smallest gestures can sometimes have the strongest impact.
Yeah, no, I'm probably going to regret saying this, but definitely there have been times when, the revisions that are necessary to meet the budget, although, at first when you hear like, I have to cut it in half, like how am I ever going to do that? And you want to throw things at the wall, but then inevitably distilling the idea down to the essential and it, I will say that it has almost always made the design better. And yes, like definitely suggestions with the technical team. Like idea that I have is not going to fit in the budget, but here, let me describe it to you, to the technical director, who I was meeting with. And, and then they came up with, they had this, response to that, which is like, well, we can't do that, but what if we could do, but we can do this. And that, it had never occurred to me that the design might evolve in that way. But yeah, I think distilling is certainly not always what you want to do at first, but ultimately very fruitful.
And I think from the technical director perspective as well, that that's such an important part of the process. Especially just to, like everybody's saying, that to be able to actually make suggestions that are based in reality and not suggestions that are based in just like what I think might be right. And then it's also not helpful. Like to be able to know what that bigger picture is, that as we're talking about distilling it and tearing it down, that I'm not talking about distilling down a version of the design that's actually like the essence. Like this one thing can't go away because of these other 5 conversations. And if I'm not part of, like, if I'm not actually hearing what all that is, that I'm just making suggestions that don't make sense versus being able to go, oh, wait, this is the essence of the design. This is the thing that we've exploded into. So that as we're having that conversation, I'm talking about it in a way that's actually helpful and not in a way that is not helpful for anybody. Because at the end of the day, it's like no one wants to put a product on stage that isn't what everybody wants it to be. Like I'm not trying to put a bad product on stage. We don't want to put a bad product on stage. So it's like, it's just working together to make sure that happens, which is what all this is. And being part of those conversations is super important.
I think that speaks even to that first conversation about collaboration. Like the earlier you're there, the more information that you have about the process and about the collective vision of the piece, you're a part of that collaboration. You are in that design process. And then when it comes down to refining or simplifying or however, like just exactly like getting it to that most well-wrought place, your suggestions and your thoughts and you're part of that conversation are all based in the conceptual clarity that you've had all the way along as being an integral part of that process.
Well, and I wonder how all that intersects too in our conversations around environmental sustainability and sort of how we talk about our process and minimizing its environmental impact, both just like in materials and whatever else, like how that thing has brought sort of new concept or new vision in your process.
I mean, sustainability is incredibly important. And I think thinking about, even if it's like adaptively reusing scenery that has been created for one piece. And then, I mean, I've done something for Project Radio City that was donated to a foundation, and you just are trying to figure out what are creative ways for adaptive reuse and to keep that sustainability, you know, at the forefront of how we're thinking about things. Materiality and recyclability is just, it becomes more important every day as we witness the sort of changes in the climate around us. But I think there's probably a lot more that we all need to think about in that terrain as well.
Yeah, it makes me think of a couple of things. I mean, one, this is going to sound kind of hokey, but I'll say it anyway. I feel like there's a magic, like I have had so many, starting with the very first project that show that I ever designed, when I was in grad school at NYU, where I think my budget was $500, and it was cat on a hot tin roof. And I ceiling fan, and we couldn't afford a ceiling fan. And then later that week, I was running an errand down on Mercer Street, and like literally there was like a ceiling fan on the street being thrown out. I have had like an uncanny number of experiences where the thing I'm looking for like gets found. You know, even the very first production of Natasha Pierre at Ars Nova, where we were like, I need all these red curtains. And through Materials for the Arts or something, we found a show that was throwing out all these red curtains. There is something about the flexibility of the way that theater production. I feel like there's this sort of ability to embrace, or find, right. It's like a much more fluid process. So I do feel that things get found and delivered and incorporated, at least for me. But then the other thing, I guess, that it makes me think of, which is still an open question, is this, this moment right now where clearly like the word resource is, takes on a different meaning, our resources are shifting, by the minute, by the week. And, maybe it's a moment when we actually have to think about, how much we value people as resources versus are questions to consider about like, what is the definition of resource and what do we value right now?
Yeah, I remember, this is just an example, maybe something that we should really think to do post-pandemic. I had done a play at the Guthrie that Mark Lamos had directed, and I had a lot of actual marble laminate. It was not painted; it was laminates. It was a play that took place in the Vatican. And I remember that Dominique Serrand from Jeune Lune was desperately looking. He had seen the production. He was based in Minneapolis, and he asked, "I would love to get that marble." I don't know how it happened, but the Guthrie gave it to him. That to me is an example of like post-pandemic, as theaters, as a collective, as a whole community of theater makers, that, for example, if you have steel that you're using for a production, or aluminum or wood or whatever, that instead of like chopping it and throwing it away, share, because there are theaters that are going to be needing this. And I think that's one way to perhaps, as we move forward, again, post-pandemic, that we could actually, Neil Mazzella, for example, does that all the time. He donates his, things that he knows he's not going to use. RPs, so many things. And I think that's one way that we should be conscious of the materials we're using, I guess, but also in the sharing when the production is done. Maybe that's one way to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I want to jump back to Mimi because I sort of feel like what you said, I mean, maybe that, and Riccardo too as well, it's like an expansion of the idea of materials for the arts. Because I sort of feel like all of our careers were probably born and go with those appointments going to that warehouse. And when you would kind of happen upon some miracle that you're like, oh my God, how is this possibly here? And the idea of expanding upon that, because that was such an amazing resource. And used to love going in there with your shopping carts and whoever you could carry along with you to help you carry it out. And but there would be that was magic too. And you would know that we are all gifted at being resourceful, and I think that is a super incredible way to think about moving forward. Like, how do we expand that idea globally?
Yeah.
I want to pick up on a point that you were making, LT, and Mimi, that you also just echoed kind of in that response. And then we have a lot of questions coming in from the audience, which is great. So I want to make sure we can get to those. But also just like talking about the folks who make this work and really thinking about the human resource that goes in, right, to the creation of the work that we all enjoy. And I'm also thinking a lot about this moment where our industry needs to meet this greater moment of racial reckoning within our country, right? And how all of us need to be rethinking our practices and sort of interrogating how we operate, and ways in which that has created racial harm, in particular for BIPOC folks. And so as sort of designers, engineers, thinking about aesthetics, what's also kind of coming up for you right now in your part of the field, or as the field collectively, really meeting this moment that's right in front of us in terms of finding an anti-racist equitable practice in the theater?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think connecting the word sustainability to human resources is kind of forefront of my mind, because right now, you know, everyone is in such a precarious situation. So if we have a pool of money, like, are we going to, you know, allow people to continue living and
Oh, we lost you, Mimi. You were right in the build up.
I know.
All right, I bet we'll get you back. Well, maybe while we wait for anyone else to jump on that one, maybe Mimi will come back to us magically.
am I back now?
Oh, there you are.
Yes.
Sorry. Where was I? I was talking about connecting sustainability and human resources, right? I mean, that to me is kind of at the forefront of my mind. And, you know, an example, I guess, is I'm on the board of Soho Rep, and announced that this season, right, instead, because there's not going to be any productions, so they're basically pivoting all of the production money to and have asked a cohort of artists to become staff members, and basically to become thought leaders, to join the theater as being thought leaders and thinking about what the theater could be like post-pandemic. So, you know, I think really thinking about the human resource as something that is really precarious right now, and is something that BIPOC people from, you know, working in this industry, because it can be quite unsustainable in terms of the financial, you know, making a living kind of aspect of it. So I think that's something that I've been thinking about a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I'll also jump in and just say, I think that, you know, for me, it's like, it's how do you, like, making space. It's like, and creating educational opportunities and paid internships, and making sure that people that want to be theater makers are in the places where they can achieve that. I mean, I having grown up in a small place where they didn't have theater, and it wasn't even something that I even knew was something that was possible as a job until I was exposed to it in college, but through the sort of education and help of others. And I feel like having education and what we're reaching out to is sponsoring internships in the studio, making sure that they can start young and have people be intrigued with the arts and understand that there are career possibilities, but, you know, making sure that they can be with you and to see what it is that we do. And yeah, creating opportunities for BIPOC people and in every aspect of our production, and being at the table for tech, being in the room while we're making models, being there for meetings that we're having, so that the whole process has become something that is you know, fully achievable and possible.
You know, to extend a little bit from what Scott just said, I think education is key. It's real, you know, to go out there all over the country, inspiring, you know, community outreach, inviting the rising BIPOC designers or performers, all of, you know, the whole group, coming to schools, coming to see what we do, introducing them to, let's say, a design meeting, design classes, technical rehearsals, and let them know that this world is possible. That because otherwise they may not have access to any of this, and it's reserved for a very small demographic. I think it's when we talk about this now in Design Action with me and some others, outreach to the communities, and education, I think, is very, very, very important. And we need it in this country because the arts are, they are not funded. And I think that would be one way to let them know that there's another world out there. Let them know that there's a world that they can express themselves and discover it.
I think the only thing that I would add to that I've been thinking about a lot as well is like, for the folks that are out there that know it's out there, but just trying to figure out their way into the experience. So like really trying to challenge that idea of like, right now it feels like whenever anybody sends an email to someone, you're just expecting that response right away. And not all designers have assistants, not all designers have studios. And it's like the people that are working as individuals and trying to break down that barrier of like what it means to always have to be in constant communication and actually setting up communication lines that are more static, or not even more static, but are just more established in a way that no one feels like they have to respond, and if they don't respond fast enough, and they're not going to get the answer to the first thing to get the answer to, and just kind of like really breaking down what that means, that as we're communicating with each other, and as folks that are just a singular person that don't have teams behind them to work with it, then they can also have a chance to be in those conversations. Because there are also the people that are trying to do 30 shows in 1 year, and they're trying to figure out how to respond to all those emails all at once, and trying to, at least as a TD in the shows that I'm doing, trying to figure out ways to also respect that barrier, that the person I'm talking to about a show can't talk to me about it 7 days a week because they're doing other things. And I'm also doing other things, like really respecting what that means for each other's time has been a large part of it that I've been thinking about.
Yeah, it's really sort of echoing something that Chanel De Silva was on last week, and she was talking a lot about examining the ways that the ecosystem is engineered and how white supremacy shows up at all levels, right? That it is in education, it is in the way that we communicate, and like that, those are sort of key components to interrogate. And also, I think sometimes folks get like, oh, what do we even do? And it's like, well, there's actually a lot of tangible things we can talk about right away. There's a lot of things that could change our practice right away that would really work. And dismantling white supremacy in particular. And it kind of feeds in to the first question I want to take from the audience here, which this Q&A is kind of blowing up. So apologies to all. We're not going to be able to get to everyone, but this is, we've got over 20 questions here, which is the most we've ever received in a lunchroom. Very exciting. So I'm just going to jump in because I think this one ties to what we're talking about. And Mimi and Scott, you had both sort of named training as an architect. And so we have a question here that as a current architecture student interested in the theater production design world, is there a path to transition over? What are things I can do to learn more and be more involved? Sometimes the road from architecture school to architecture practice feels like a rigid path and difficult to break away from.
Yeah, I mean, I guess certainly, yes, the path from our school to being an architect does seem, that's, I mean, in some ways, that's one of the ways I could see. I often say that I loved being in architecture school so much, but I could see that the path to actually becoming an architect and practicing as an architect was maybe not as appealing. And sometimes I say that I became a set designer because I wanted to stay in architecture school forever. And, I mean, I have had a number of people approach, people who are currently in architecture or architecture school. I've mentored a bunch of folks who were trying to make that transition. For me, I basically wanted to try to introduce them to the process and the lifestyle. So I would invite people, to come into a load-in, come into a tech rehearsal, to come see dress rehearsals, and try to be as honest as I can about the profession, that it is really different. But I think trying to kind of witness as much of the process as possible and see if it's a very different lifestyle, I don't know, Scott, what would you say?
Yeah, I would say exactly, because I do think that the path from architecture school onto what's next, is it to grad school or into a professional practice? It does feel like it's a prescribed path. And I think probably for me and myself, I mean, and what I found was like there were things that were so gratifying about that process of the architectural education, and then trying to figure out how do you parlay that into sort of a lifetime career where you're in that kind of conceptual phase so much, and the dream phase of all of that. But I think that exactly what you said, Mimi, it's like, and I've done this as well, and we'll always continue to do that, to have architects that are interested in making that transition to be exposed to all the facets of the work that we do, and to the other collaborators, and so that they can find find the understanding of what it is that we do, because it isn't for everybody. I mean, we're such nocturnal creatures, and that's something that is just a very simplistic way of saying it, but like we have very strange hours compared to many people, and that's not for everybody. And but at the other end, though, like witnessing the process, I did have friends when I was in grad school that were and my sort of close friends were in the architecture school there. And they were always so blown away about how fast we can go from concept to realization. And that was something that they found always to be so not only fascinating, but gratifying, and watching us go from a sketch to a model to the completion within a sort of series of months. And one I remember said in specific was like, God, that would be longer to renovate a bathroom than what you guys did to do this elaborate production. So it's just really, I think, letting people be with you and witness the process and find out what is inspiring to them, what's gratifying to them. And then that path is there for their achievement. And I think that it's not necessarily a traditional path, but it's like finding the way to get to the part of it that you love the most.
I have another question here from our viewers. This is for all four of you, really. Sort of back to our conversation about human resources, talking about sustainability, talking about anti-racism. This question, since we were at a place where we were looking to restructure the way we make and engage with theater, are there any thoughts, comments, ideas about restructuring or reimagining the way we tech shows, particularly around creative ideas, financial ideas, and also just collaboratively how we engage in the tech process?
I mean, just quickly, I think that there is people are already moving to a model of not having these crazy hours. I think that's taking advantage, saying this is a productive amount of time in order to make that, do the work in the day that we have. And usually we're worn so thin by the time we get to 10:30, 11, midnight, whatever. The idea of even just reducing the hours to a more, I guess, sort of humane place is a beginning.
I agree. There's, I believe that when you are on back-to-back 10 out of 12s, what good comes at 11:30? It's just not, and think about the performers, it's everybody, and the technicians, and the TDs, and the crew. They have to show up at 7 a.m. or it's just it's inhuman. It's actually it has been inhuman. Families have been disrupted. If you're in the regional theater as a designer and you go from show to show to show to show, it's an impossible life. It's not conducive to respecting the collective, respecting the people that are putting the show together. It just doesn't make any sense anymore. It never did to me, but it truly doesn't make any sense. That has to change.
Yeah.
We've got 1 minute left. And this is kind of a fun question here that I would love to throw to all four of you for your sort of just quick, gut check response. Dream show that you would work on to either design or build.
A Rose Parade float.
Great answer.
I want to do Tristan on his old, wherever.
A Borgesian library experience / performance.
It doesn't exist yet, but my gut reaction is a musical about Kesha's life story. Is something I'm passionate about. Which is, probably not there's no technical aspect that I know about, but that is something I think should exist.
LT, watch out, because if Diane Paulus is listening. But you may have just programmed the 22-23 season. Look out. Well, it's 1:00, which, just tells me we had not nearly enough time to continue chatting, but I'm so grateful to all four of you for joining today. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And as always, thanks everyone for watching. We will be back next week. Next week, we're actually going to be, due to popular demand, re-airing our conversation with Sean LeCount and Summer Williams at Company One, as well as giving a little sneak peek into their season upcoming. So make sure if you didn't get to watch that last week, you get to join us, or watch that a few months ago, you'll get to join us next week as we rebroadcast that. That's all for now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.